so, Christie. I'm so excited.
A non-broke.
Right about 9.
All you're doing is just gonna pay for it.
What's going on now?
Yes,
I'd like to call this meeting to order and start with a pledge allegiance to the flag, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome everyone to our budget session, and we will start with a roll call, please.
Counselor Whitfield, Counselor Morocco, Counselor Petropoulos.
Here.
Counselor Gilat,
Here.
Counselor Grimaldi,
Here.
Counselor Peeler, Counselor Lavin,
I am here.
Counselor Brennan,
Here?
Mayor Valentino.
Here. And I will say that Counselor Whitfield and Counselor Morocco both let me know that they would not be here tonight due to medical concerns. So there's a slight correction before we move into public hearing. One is we're going to have a correction in the 2026 budget book. Adam will speak on this prior to the public hearing.
Yes, so there were a couple formula corrections that we had to make to the budget document itself. Nothing impacting 2026, just formatting and some formula corrections for the 24 unaudited actuals and the 25 budget. So Amy's passing those out now. We'll put them in the document. Again, they don't have any impact on the 2026 budget numbers, but they do on the display of the document. So this will just update that.
Thank you, City Comptroller. I am going to make a motion, because I don't see it on the agenda, to add a resolution to set a public hearing for our next October 1st meeting for local law number 4-2025 to amend the city charter regarding the residency requirements for the city manager, and I so move, and I would like a second. Seconded by Councilor Petropoulos. Discussion. Clerk, please call the roll on setting the public hearing.
Counselor Petropoulos,
Aye.
Counselor Gilat,
Aye.
Counselor Grimaldi,
Aye.
Counselor Lavin,
Aye.
Counselor Brennan,
Aye.
Mayor Valentino.
Aye.
Motion carried.
We will have that resolution right after the public hearing. Next on the agenda, I will open the public hearing for the 2026 City of Geneva budget, and I have one person written down, Cy Smith. Cy, if you'd like to come to the podium, please.
We're taking a look at the recommended budget.
Cy, might I ask you to get closer to the mic? That way, anybody that's online that
Okay.
would like to hear what you're
Can you
saying,
hear me
thank you
now?
very much. Yep. There you go.
Okay.
Thank you.
We've reviewed the 2026 budget, and we had a written presentation which Nicole has circulated to you. And I'll just very, very briefly summarize it. The budget calls for a 2% increase in the tax levy, a 7.45 expenditure increase, primarily attributable to a very large increase in healthcare costs. If you take away the healthcare cost increase, the rest of the budget is about $200,000 to $300,000 increase over last year's. So the city manager has kept the lid on, and really an extreme case of zero-based budgeting. The financial plan that's embedded in the budget, we think, will draw down the general fund to a level that would impair the financial health of the city. When we look at the proposed fund balances, which are set forth in the table in our presentation, we see that accepting all of the general fund appropriations embodied in the budget would bring us down to a level where we would have a very, very low ratio of general fund balance to general fund expenditures. Why is this important? The most critical factor, the one thing that everyone looks at first to determine the financial health of a municipality, is the ratio of the general fund balance to the general fund expenditures. It's the starting point for the state controller's financial stability reporting system, and it's embodied in the recommendation of the state governmental finance officers. The high range, the one that we're currently at, is 25%. The general fund should equal 25% of the proposed expenditures, and we're just about at that level, and we've been at or near that level for a number of years. The next step down is 20%, and that's in the middle of the range, and the bottom of the range is about 16%. So when we look at what's happening to the general fund under the recommended budget, we see that by the end of 2026, it would be down to a level of about the bare minimum, 15, 16% in there. We think that would have very serious consequences for the city. Currently, the city has a AA bond rating. We're in the bond market constantly. There are capital improvements all the time, both for the payable from the general fund and the water and sewer fund. So our concern was how to get the general fund to an acceptable level. Now, it's clear that the principal driver of the problem this year is the huge increase in health costs. And that's a mandatory expense. It's very large. We don't think that, we don't really have a feeling for it. We haven't heard anything about how it came about, but it's a fact that the city manager had to deal with. So to get us down to a general fund balance, get us up to a general fund balance that would provide an acceptable ratio, which we think is in the range of 20% or a 5-to-1 margin. We would recommend the following. First, that the drawdown of the general fund through appropriations be limited to $565,000 rather than the current $835,000. Of course, there are two additional proposals in connection with the bonding of the fire engine and the bonding of the recreation complex that would draw down another $200,000 each. We think those which are not formally subject to appropriation now but are on the horizon as part of the capital improvement program, those should, instead of those funds coming from the general fund, they should be bonded because they are capital in nature. So with the $565,000 cap, there's a need for about $270,000 that has to come from somewhere to keep the lights on. Our recommendation on that is first, increase the tax levy to the current inflation rate, 2.7%. That's the same thing we recommended last year, going the other way. Here we're saying, hey, taxpayers are stakeholders in the city, and we have a responsibility to pay our fair share. The second thing is that we have an interfund borrowing from the water and sewer funds of $104,000 each. Now, those would be 3 years under our proposal, payable back over the following 3 years in equal principal amounts. Those funds, those amounts are well in excess of the recommended balances in the fund. Why do we recommend an interfund borrowing? Well, as you know, the controller, the state controller, has the position that water fund balances that have been generated by water rates to city residents should not be used to subsidize the general fund. And the reason for that is a public policy one, that water is, a family of four, regardless of their financial circumstances, is going to have about the same water bill, whether it's high end or low end. Whereas property taxes are generally correlated with family income. So to take something that's generated across the board, like a sales tax, and apply it to the property tax would provide an undue benefit for the wealthier segments who are paying higher property taxes. So we think that an interfund borrowing, which commits the city to pay the money back to the respective enterprise funds, would not be subject to criticism by the controller. The controller, as you know, comes around and audits, and we think this would pass audit. It's in our judgment, this huge increase in the healthcare costs is an extraordinary event. And basically what we're saying is, let's finance it over the following 3 years. That's the practical effects of our proposal.
Si, we have your document, and we're well beyond 3 minutes. Is there a way you can wrap this up, please?
Do we have what?
We have your document,
Right.
and you're well beyond the 3 minutes. I was just wondering if there's
Okay,
a way to
I'm
wrap
over
this
the
up.
3 minutes.
Yeah, we can study your document offline.
I won't bore you with my...
Is everything in your document?
What?
Is everything in your document you've provided to us?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, we
Yeah.
can study that.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah. And,
Anything you want to say to wrap it up is fine. I don't want to push you off the podium.
okay. So we just wanted to summarize the practical effects of this. We don't want to see the city's hands tied, and particularly with the new administration coming in and with their own policy objectives. We don't think it's proper to leave them with the general fund drawn down to the minimum bare level. The rest of what we've got in our thing is but the ramp on zero-based budgeting. You did it this year, and let's keep at that. Let's have stability. Last year we were talking about a 20% tax increase. Now we're talking about a 2% tax increase. Let's stick with an inflation-adjusted rate. That's one that works. People who are retired, their Social Security is adjusted by the inflation rate every year. People who are working are generally going to get inflation raises. So stability itself is a major goal and one that would provide the basis for economic development. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, sir.
Can I ask a question?
The public comment, there's no back and forth.
Yeah.
You can do that offline all you want.
Okay.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Next is a resolution to set a public hearing, local law number 40-2025, to amend the city charter regarding the residency requirement for the city manager. I will make that motion. I need a second for the set the public hearing. Councilor Gilat, excuse me. Any discussion? This public hearing, when you read through the local law, it will align us with the city police chief and the city fire chief. Clerk, please call the roll.
Counselor Petropoulos,
Aye.
Counselor Gilat,
Aye.
Counselor Grimaldi, Counselor Lavin,
Aye.
Counselor Brennan,
Aye.
Mayor Valentino.
Aye.
Motion carried.
Okay, next is appointments to boards and commissions, and we have one appointment, I believe, Counselor Gilat.
Excuse me. The IDA recommends the reappointment of Irene Rodriguez to the IDA Board. Ms. Rodriguez' term will expire on September 30, 2025. Her new term would expire September 30th, 2030, so I move.
I need a second. Counselor Lavin, any discussion? Clerk, please call the roll.
Counselor Petropoulos,
Aye.
Counselor Gilat,
Aye.
Counselor Grimaldi, Counselor Lavin,
Aye.
Counselor Brennan,
Aye.
Mayor Valentino.
Aye.
Motion carried.
Okay, next is what we all been waiting for, the 2026 budget discussion, and I'm not sure who I'm passing this off to, because I'd be happy to take the lead, but you don't want to hear what I got to say.
All right, well, I'll start it off, and I'm sure you guys will all have discussion. As we've done in the past 3 years, I've asked that you send questions in advance so the department heads can be here. A little different this time. Each session is slated for not necessarily a department, but a function. So tonight, we're going to be focused a lot on public works, water, sewer, as well as some on debt, as well as fund balances and other funds. Next week, you will be, so questions actually are due tomorrow for next week's session, which, once I scroll there, will be recreation, fire, and some administration. We're going to divide administration, which is HR, IT, city manager, finance, over 2 sessions. So the next meeting will be September 30th, and it'll be on those topics. But for tonight, we'll start off, and you're going to find that we're going to be sharing this microphone a lot because the comptroller has a lot to say tonight. We're going to start really, though, talking about water, sewer funds, and enterprise funds. I did give you the questions. I will say, as the questions aligned, we may not call out specific questions because as we talk about the 3 separate funds, some strengths and limitations, we'll also get into why we choose those funds. Another piece to this is we discussed briefly the potential of setting up an enterprise fund for recreation. We'll talk more about that enterprise fund for recreation in the next meeting. But tonight, I'm going to start off with Adam really giving an overview of our current funds, which are water fund, sewer fund, and general fund, why they exist and why we use them, some pros and cons of them, and how they work.
Thank you, Amy. So yeah, just a quick overview of the enterprise funds versus our general fund. Our general fund is kind of the catch-all when it comes to city operations. It's anything that is funded by taxes and other fees similar to taxes. Enterprise fund is more of an accounting system that tracks revenues of a self-sustaining service. So it's more business-like than the general fund. So water and sewer, for example, are our enterprise funds. Both of them have their own expenses, and all of their costs are offset by user fees for the water and for the sewer, just based off of consumption of the water system. So, there's some benefits to that. Obviously, the separate accounting makes it nice because you can really track how those funds are performing and use those kinds of metrics. Again, it is more like a business where the business is selling water service, and we are charging our customers the amount that it costs to provide that service. The general fund is different. There's a lot of different things that can fall into the general fund, and taxes can obviously be something that change year over year and go to things like the highway department or the finance department that don't generate revenue. So departments like that, you won't see enterprise funds for because they don't generate any specific revenue. Police department, they have parking tickets, but certainly parking tickets aren't going to sustain an entire police department. So that's why, we had talked about recreation. We will do that next week as well. That's a much more viable option because there are user fees connected with recreation. So we will discuss that. Other than that, it's mainly just water and sewer that we have enterprise funds for. Some other places have airports, public transportation, things like that. The city of Geneva does not, so at this time, we just have the water and the sewer funds. They're completely separate. You can do transfers in between those two funds and the general fund. In the 26 budget, you will see a transfer from the water fund to the general fund, from the sewer fund to the general fund, and that is several employees that are paid in the general fund are performing work that impacts the water and sewer fund, and so we are recouping those costs that way. So you'll see that in the budget. That's what that is related to.
Who, can we ask questions here?
Sure.
Who determines how much we charge for the good services of Mr. Venuti and your good services and the manager's good service in overseeing these enterprise funds that are quite technical, take real experience? How do you set the rates for that?
So I usually just kind of have I have a spreadsheet that I work off of that I share with our auditing team to make sure that things are staying, at a reasonable rate. And then I take a percentage of just the total all-in cost for each employee. So it's not super scientific, but it's enough where we can justify how much is coming from those funds. At one point years ago, we did do our own internal version of a time study to determine how much time was going to each. But there's also other factors other than just time,
Sure.
that go into it. So I would say we probably don't have a perfect formula for it, but it's one that we're comfortable justifying. And we've ran that by our auditing firm, and they agree.
But have you looked at other municipalities to see how they charge for the services?
Yep.
I mean, you're like a lawyer, so is Amy. You're $300 an hour, not a
Wish.
percentage of your salary.
Sure.
And
Yeah. So we have over the years. There's municipalities that we refer to as our peer cities, and I've always reached out to them, kind of bounced ideas off of them in terms of what do you guys do in these kinds of situations. And so I do check in with places like Batavia, Auburn, things like that. They're a little bigger, but still same concept, and base our numbers off of that. Another thing that will come up a bunch tonight is going to be our water sewer rate study that we have coming to be presented to the council here soon. That factors in those things as well. We've tried to factor in everybody's workload. Even IT is involved with that because they're doing things, especially at the water and sewer plants. So trying to incorporate as much as we can so that it's justifiable and fair to each fund.
But in calculating the value to out-of-district people of your time and your effort, I've been reading through the state's obligation. They almost encourage you to charge much more for out-of-district costs and expenses, and I don't know that we apply that to some sense with an auditing team of equal. And I think there's money there that we're leaving on the table, perhaps, and certainly not something, who's going to enforce that? Not the auditing team.
Right.
It would be some users who would have to get together and say, you're charging too much of Amy's time or too much of Amy's expertise. And I think that's a tough putt for critics of ours.
Yeah.
But
And I think, that's one of the reasons that we went with this water and sewer rate study, because it gives us that backing to say, this is why we are changing our mechanism for charging those costs and those fees. And again, using a firm that works not just in our region, but throughout the state and really in the country. I think it helps us give that credibility to that discussion, so we don't repeat history and have lawsuits and all of that between our neighbors. Let's come at it together, and that's one of the reasons that some of those other municipalities are helping fund that study, and are going to participate in that. I think a piece to this too, though, and I'm going to switch to Joe, is a question that had come up on municipal water and sewer rates and how they're determined. And Joe, I know you prepared an answer on that, so. Yep.
So, I think one of the questions was, is there a universal rate that was proposed? And there's not a universal water or sewer rate. We use metered volumes for consumption, and that measures what the usage is from a customer. Our billing cycles are quarterly, and we currently charge a one-time tap fee if someone wanted a new development came in and needed to connect to the main. Very common. That would include all labor and equipment and materials for us to do the work. Our rates currently include operation and maintenance, which is our budgets that we're preparing, our cost to work here annually. And we don't impose a separate capital charge for infrastructure upgrades. We've talked here over the years about, the last couple of years, about increased revenue. That's something the city could look at as a whole. Whether or not, let's say we're gonna redo Castle Street this year, should there be an assessment, if you will, to pay additional fees for new water mains, new sewer sanitary laterals, and the same for these infrastructure upgrades. So the only other thing that I've mentioned about the service work and our fees is if there are penalty fees, we do have a 5% assessment. So that's basically what we have in place for our rate structure.
And then just one of the other questions that had come up is all the charges and payments from water and sewer to the city general fund. So that's what Adam just discussed. So if you look on page 83 of your budget book, you can see the water fund, and that's $369,217 that'll go from the water fund to the general fund. And then sewer fund is on page 89 of the budget book, and that total amount is $324,067. So that's what Adam just discussed, where we're charging off for that. I'm gonna go through the current charges for water and sewer to outside municipalities. Adam, do you want to talk about that one?
Okay. So a question came in about water and sewer to outside municipalities, revenue being calculated, things like that. So for the water fund, all the water revenue is based off of consumption. We don't break it out by municipal charges versus residential consumer charges. So it's all encompassing through rate revenue, which you'll see in the revenue line items. Again, something that's being reviewed as a part of the water sewer fund rate study. All these things are being looked at to see, again, what makes the most sense, what can we justify, and how can everyone benefit. In the sewer fund, it's a little bit different. There are obviously sewer revenue that comes from the residents, but then outside of the city, we have two intermunicipal agreements, one with the town of Geneva, one with the town of Waterloo, and those, page 86 on the budget book, we have those, and those are based off of the city's sewer fund budget. So it's a percentage of the sewer fund budget that we charge. And those agreements are, I'm not sure off the top of my head what year each of them expire, but those are also being looked at by the consulting team at GHD who's handling the rate study to see if that needs to be looked at, if it's too high, too low, whatever. That is something that's being taken into consideration, again, to make sure that everything's justifiable and that it works for the city of Geneva. Sure. So the total amount for sewer is $865,000 $953. So that's just coming from town of Waterloo, town of Geneva. The town of Waterloo is a much smaller percentage than the town of Geneva portion. And we put the town of Waterloo agreement in place several years after the town of Geneva. Let's see, 30%. What's the 30%? Oh, okay. So a question came up, what would a 30% increase be to those agreements? So the total, about 260,000. So instead of 865,000 in our budget from the outside municipalities, we'd have about a little over 1.1 million. So pretty substantial jump, 260,000 from just the two municipalities. And again, it's being looked at. We've shared those agreements, and something that will certainly be probably one of the hottest topics of the rate study.
We also have the town of Seneca that gives you stuff, but we get nothing for, right?
I'm sorry?
Town of Seneca is a customer, but we don't charge them.
Yeah, we touched on that at the last meeting, Counselor, that town of Seneca does discharge to the town of Geneva, which discharges to us. The current volume factor that we utilize does include town of Seneca, including any I&I that is picked up at either of those towns that goes through the meters.
But we don't go back and audit what the town is getting from the town of Seneca, or how the town of Geneva is charging for the service that we give them.
Correct. We do wholesale. So when we do wholesale, we sell a wholesale product to the town of Geneva, and then the town of Geneva sells part of their product to the town of Seneca. But if we were to audit the town of Seneca, we would probably end up with the same amount because it's done by capacity. It's not done by municipality. So the town of Geneva has a certain percentage of capacity. That's what they pay for. They don't use that whole capacity, so they then allow the town of Seneca to flow through and use that same capacity.
But that decision to do capacity rather than measured, they could be our customers too.
Correct. I think one of the things that's key to the wholesale, and Joe, I'm going to have you talk about it a little more before I really mess it up, but there are certain things that a wholesale customer doesn't get, whereas our local customers do get it. So if you want to talk a little bit about the difference in service.
Yeah, the biggest thing is the maintenance part, right? So we fix sewer breaks, we fix when there's pipe that's cracked, we fix when things are collapsed. We don't go to the town to do that work. We definitely don't go to the town of Seneca to do that work. We maintain our plant. It's full capacity 24/7. We handle these big events, the rain events and heavy snow melts with our staff. That's the biggest difference. Why it's that way and how we meter it. We're very confident in the numbers, and we're hoping that this rate study will shed some lights on potential some changes or recommendations, at least, that we can present to y'all to look at for any further changes in the structures.
A full audit of the town's charging they charge their commercial proper, or their sewer by assessment, not by usage. And that means people in the town and in the higher priced homes and the businesses are paying way more than the people in the city of Geneva compared to residential. And but without an audit, we have no idea what the potential for us. If we ran our own water and sewer system, could we greatly reduce the cost to the people of Geneva, the citizens of Geneva, the residents, because we know all this information?
Yeah, it's certainly possible, as well as even incorporating some of the town's strategies where you charge based on square footage of properties to the commercial buildings. We could definitely entertain something like that.
Yeah, and so the questions come up in the past about charging based off of assessment. And I did have a few lengthy discussions with NICOM, got to the bottom of it that you can do that. However, it then becomes a sewer tax rather than a sewer service fee, at which point any tax exempt properties would then become tax exempt from that sewer tax. So what the town is doing, I think, is billing based on value, but they have far less non-taxable property is my assumption. And so, you know, if you look at, you know, I think Walgreens would be one that if that would be something that's taxable, and that they would be charging based off of assessed value rather than actual consumption. So it's something we could do, but it still kind of takes away from the tax exempt properties.
Is there some literature you can share on that legal distinction that becomes a tax?
Yep.
That seems
Yeah.
complex to me.
Yep, I can share that with council.
Joe and Adam, there is a proposal, I think the town of Fayette is going to be upgrading their sewer system. I believe that will affect the town of Waterloo's systems, but does that affect our systems? In other words, besides the towns of Waterloo and Seneca, will the town of Fayette be a factor in either in the next year or in the next 5 years?
So you will soon have an intermunicipal agreement before you from the town of Fayette to be
Okay.
another customer in this. They have also offered to work through the study and all of that to make sure that they're aligning everything with us and working as a partner through that. They've met a few times, and I think I've shared that in a few updates, that we're looking forward to that intermunicipal agreement, but they'll be working with us. You also have to remember the town of Fayette is very large, and so they won't only be coming to us, they'll be going to multiple places because it's a large, not population, but land.
Understood. Thank you.
But that agreement won't set rates until we get this study and a big discussion here.
Correct. It would be part of the water and sewer rate study. That's one of the reasons we've held the agreement, is because we want to combine all of them together so that you're making those decisions based on the facts that we're finding throughout that study.
Database decisions, won't that be great? I'm looking forward to the water and sewer study, the rate study, because, you know, whether we're charging enough, whether we're not charging, we have the opportunity to charge more, whether things are legal or illegal. I think we're going to learn a lot when this study actually comes to the surface, and it's going to be a great discussion. I think the challenge, we've always wanted to charge more to residents outside the city of Geneva, or to municipalities outside the city of Geneva, because we have a lot of pride in our water and sewer plants. But there are limitations both legally and structurally that you need to take into consideration. So that study will give us the data we'll be able to leverage on that. It's going to be important.
Maybe I missed it, but what will this study be at?
Microphone, please.
What's that?
Microphone. Your mic.
Yeah, I might have missed it, but when will this study be out?
So we are in discussions with them now, trying to find a good time for them to come make a presentation. We want it to be as soon as possible.
So it's done?
It's basically, yeah, it's close to being done. They wanted to, and we want them to share with city council what they've found, so that we can kind of plan for the future on it.
We, with the addition of like Fayette or whoever else, do we have the capacity to handle all that, or we have to upgrade it again? And what capital costs would be involved with that? And who's gonna pay for it, besides us?
So, yeah, currently, the ATAD project, which is underway, we just awarded all 5 contracts to upgrade the facility. Will give the city basically double the expansion to handle solids. In some of my earlier presentations, I talked about solids and liquids. Our liquid capacity is fine currently. The solids, we were up against a 95% capacity with no room for reserve. So the state DEC and the EPA don't like that. So the expansions that's happening around the towns and the developments that are proposed and happening will be able to connect to us, and those rates will be, the percentages will increase the flows, and when this rates are changed, it'll reflect those volumes. That's the intention.
The solids, that we sell out, we can sell off to other, like, farms and stuff, or is that a given kind of thing?
No, so the product that we currently produce is called a Class A biosolid, and we are not currently selling any, but we are producing it. We've gone out, this is, I think, the 10th year of trial and testing and manipulation with the DEC, and the product could be, hopefully someday, it'd be a sellable product, but we currently don't sell it.
But the benefit is not sending it to the landfill, so
Exactly.
we reduce our costs for expenditures for not sending it to landfill.
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, keep moving.
All right, I am going to turn it over to Joe, and he's going to talk about mutual aid for DPW, and I'll hand these out on my way out of the room for a minute.
Okay, thank you, City Manager. One of the questions we received was to get an itemized detail on shared services for highway and sewer. And while there's not an official individual town agreement, my department currently works under Ontario County's engineering support and mutual aid strategy. And I believe the informational packet that Amy's put out talks about a 48-hour allowance, if you will, of services from the County Public Works engineering team that could assist us with projects. And we've used that for survey work and some help in the engineering office. To break it out, 24 hours of free service annually. 2 guys drive here, work for a day. That's 16 hours of the 24 hours. So it's not a substantial amount of time, but in perspective, we do utilize that when we can and need it. My staff and I are committed to support and more often be supported much more than we ever help the surrounding towns. This mutual aid agreement that we have in place I think it started in 2017. Since I've been here, it's been renewed for 5 years in 2022, which in a nutshell allows all the neighboring communities, municipalities to partake in sharing. Like, we share equipment, we share materials. If someone has a breakdown and we have a piece of equipment that we are not using, we can work with them on. So that happens routinely. And our highway superintendent and our neighboring superintendents always work together behind the scenes. We've helped the town of Phelps do some paving this year, I'm sorry. Geneva borrowed some of our equipment, our VACON air compressor. We borrowed town of Geneva's sewer cameras. We've assisted Seneca. We've assisted Gorham. I believe their sweeper broke down, so we helped them clean up the village for an event they had this summer. But just this recently, if you've all witnessed this milling and paving we've done, and it's substantial. I estimate 480 hours of trucking time from these neighboring towns and village to a tune of about $96,000 that we shared, we partnered with. And, our staff, we buy pizza and wings at lunchtime in between the paving break. So it's a very useful agreement. And storm events, cleanup, anything like that, we're at the ready, and so are they. Just in time.
So Joe, I think I'm hearing numbers, but I think your intention is that we get more than we expend when it comes to shared services?
Absolutely. In the time that I've been here anyway, we have definitely received more than we've given to our neighboring towns and in the entire county and even Yates or Seneca.
So a shout out to those municipalities that are providing those services to us. Thank you very much.
All right, I'm going to shift topics again. One of the questions we got in was about all the parkland in the city by acreage and how many are subject to state repurposing requirements. So the total acreage of all the parks is on page 71 of your budget book. There are 15 parks and 108 acres. Every park is subject to park alienation laws. And what I mean by that, park alienation laws are not limited to parcels that have been officially designated as parks. It's more about how it's been demonstrated as the property. If it's treated like a park, it may be part of park alienation laws. And so we did look into that with legal. I know Taylor followed up on it, so I don't know if there's anything else to add, Taylor? Okay. Another one that came in that's not water and sewer is about an estimate. Oh, question, sorry.
Real quick about the park alienation. We discussed it last meeting, and those procedures are basically what would need to be followed if that were to be the case.
Correct. So park alienation, there's a very lengthy document that comes from New York State Parks, Department of Parks and Recreation. It follows, it's a local law that then you have to take and get approval at the state level, and it has to be signed by both parties in the governor's office, or both houses in the governor's office. So it starts here, and then you ask basically for that to move all the way through as we would any other larger municipal laws that we don't have jurisdiction on.
That applies even if the state never had anything to do with that land.
Correct. If it's a park, that you may have to follow park alienation laws.
Well, I think that's I think it's universal. You have to follow park alienation. It may be more difficult if federal or state money
Correct.
was put into that park.
Absolutely. All right, I'm going to move to short-term rentals. So the short-term rentals and revenues there, if we were to limit the increases to 100 units or double the licensing fee, I want to start with what we do for short-term rentals right now. So we don't do it based on how many units we have. We do it based on bedrooms. And so we have 214 bedrooms that have been licensed for short-term rentals. We estimate there are about 27 bedrooms that have not reached out to receive their license. This number could vary slightly, plus or minus 10 to 15, and that's because what we're looking at is the listings for those 27 bedrooms, where someone may say it's a 3-bedroom, but when we go to inspect it, we may find it's a 4, or we may find that they can only be licensed for 2 because they're using something that can't be used as a bedroom. And that's one of the pieces of that legislation, was to check the safety of some of these rentals. The licensing fee is based on that per bedroom and is $250 per year, but we collect 2 years at once. So $250 per bedroom per year. We collect 2 years, so we collect $500 per bedroom, but expands 2 years. So the total collected is $53,500 per year. We collected 2 this year. Because of that, the amount for budgeting purposes is going to fluctuate year over year, because some years you're going to collect both for 2 years, and then the next year you won't collect anything. Now we can do some budgeting on that side where we know $53,500 was collected for this year, and we can put 53 for next year because we'll hold it back. And that's kind of the overview of the short-term rentals. If we limit it to 100 units, if we're talking about homes, we're not even at 100 units yet, so it wouldn't limit that. If you doubled the licensing fees, well, 53.5 times 2 times 2 years, you can see you're about $200,000 total.
I guess that was the question. As far as enforcement goes, we talked about it in a couple of council meetings. Enforcement for collection, enforcement to see if they're
Right.
registered. How are we doing with that?
So like I said, 214 bedrooms have been registered. Some still need final licensing or permitting. And we estimate 27 bedrooms haven't been completed. So we're at about, quick numbers, between 80 and 90% complete, which is pretty high in your first year.
We're not looking at the 3% occupancy tax or anything like that yet, or maybe, or I'm not sure where we are with that. I know it came up.
Yeah, so that's something council can look at, but it's the same as the park alienation process. So that has to be moved from here. You guys can go ahead and put that forward. It then has to be carried by the Senate and the Assembly. And your senator and your assembly member would have to choose to take that tax increase forward. and then it would go to the governor for signature should they choose to do that.
Does the state's short-term rental process, if we just took theirs on, include the occupancy tax in it?
No, it just includes the collection, and they continue to do that. It doesn't change that. One of the things that could change, and I've been working with the county briefly on this, is our registry is something that we go on our own, so we pay for our registry right now. The county may use a different system, and they'll incorporate us into their system. The only challenge with that is we use our system to collect all of the funding, and we work in that system. The new county system may not be able to do all of those pieces, but we'll work with them. I would much rather they take that on, and hopefully it will have the same functionality as ours without causing us loss of that functionality.
We've been solicited, and I'm sure you saw it, from a company that says we actually have 150 short-term rentals in this community.
Yep.
But we're only identifying in our own records 110 or something.
Correct.
Have we rectified that
Yes.
sales pitch?
Yes. So that happened with our current vendor as well, and this is a competitor to that one. As they clean the data, and as we clean the data, we find that some of them may be multiple sites. They may be town of Geneva versus city of Geneva. They may no longer offer the short-term rentals, which then we verify multiple times. So there's some ways there. And back to the enforcement piece, we have not yet used total enforcement, which means fines and fees, which is the next step for those outlier outlier homes.
Implementing a occupancy tax for Airbnbs would level the playing field
Yeah.
between hotels and bed and breakfasts. It would definitely be the way to go. I've had those conversations with our senator and our assemblyman. In carrying a bill that increases taxes is not high on their list. I'll tell you that right now.
Well, they probably couldn't get it through anyway because they're Republicans right now, right?
Well, you have a Democratic majority in the state, but our
Yeah, but
Republican
ours,
our Republican representatives are not interested in carrying an increase in tax.
Wayne County got it somehow.
So we're going to move on to three of my favorite things: fund balance, bonding, and debt service. One of the questions that came up was regarding the marina project funds. So currently, the city has borrowed $3.2 million total for that project. Currently, well, it was going to be for a marina. Some things changed along the way, which we've discussed. The bonded funds now are going to be utilized for pier stabilization, and then any matching requirements if the state is able to repurpose any of the marina funds to replace the current dock structures. So as it is the case with all bonded funds, we can only use it for the specific purposes that we said we were borrowing it for, or we can return those funds. So again, we've borrowed $3.2 million. The question came up kind of where those funds are. So they're kind of sitting in our capital reserve account waiting to be either expended on a marina type project or to be returned to the bank that lent us that money. Yes.
I know council voted against the pier improvement. Is it a case of all or nothing at all? I mean, we got to use all of it or none of it, or will pier stabilization? Okay.
Yeah, I got your question. So what we're looking at right now, and we've been working with the state partners, I feel like weekly, if not daily, on repurposing the funding to continue with the pier stabilization piece and the current dock structure. There is a giant clock ticking on the ability to do that because we've already asked for multiple extensions to this project. So the bonded funds, we believe, could be used for the matching purposes to the grant. We would not use that total amount of bonded funds, but we should be able to do pier stabilization and those docking structures, we believe, if we get the approval. Right now, we're still waiting. Our engineers have been working with Joe and his team and the state to get that final approval to do the stabilization piece, because that was the discussion that council had, was no marina, but go forward with looking at that stabilization. And the state, the multiple agencies, that's the other fun part of this. It's not one agency, it's not one funding stream, it's multiple funding streams. I will say has been very considerate and working with us to try to figure this out.
Before, when we were talking about killing this marina, it still seems to be on some sort of resuscitation method, but for budgeting purposes. But let's say 2 million is not needed for anything. And it goes back. What effect is that going to have on our immediate financial position? Just reduces our indebtedness. So that
Kind of. Because we just borrowed this year, so that's not in your current indebtedness. And Adam, I'm going to let you explain that, because that leads to the next question.
Yep. So it would take down our total, what the total number, I think we
44 million.
42, whatever it is. Yeah. So it would knock that down. It also, we'd have to look, since 3.2 has been borrowed. Sometimes I don't believe we have any of this type of debt, but sometimes there's prepayment penalties, things like that. Typically they don't do that anymore, so we don't have to worry about it. But of that 3.2 million, 2 of it going back, where does that 2 fall? Is it the newest 2, or how does that work? So it would definitely come off of the total, but some of those funds have already been paid back in terms of our debt service annually. Not a lot, whatever it comes out to as an annual debt service, couple $100,000 probably. So it would knock down our total number and give us a little bit more capacity, but it wouldn't change much on an annual debt service.
Well, we're over the if we kept it and used it, it would be 20 years, or if it,
Yes, 15. Yeah.
15 years.
Yep.
But it would have some immediate effect on our position, if not our current budget.
Yes. Yep. Our position, not the budget, as you mentioned. And so another question that came up that we have on this list is related to our capital plan and how it impacts our financials. So it's kind of, we're looking at the 2026 budget right now and our 2026 capital plan. So if that all gets approved and we move forward with a borrowing, most likely in January, we wouldn't see any impact on our 2026 capital plan financially till 2027. So typically the first year of the plan is when you're figuring out the borrowing and getting everything settled, and you don't actually make any debt service payments on that debt yet. So in terms of future debt, 2026 debt service is set. Those numbers we already know, they won't change. The 2026 capital plan will affect our 2027 annual debt service, and then 15 years beyond that, if that makes sense.
When we killed the marina, at the time we said we could do the work on the pier without any of this grant money. We're still, I realize we'd like to maximize the use of the grant money, but if we didn't and we just put 3.2 back, that would further improve our position on indebtedness going forward.
Yep.
And
yeah, any amount for any project that we did that with would help that position. General water sewer fund, doesn't matter, depending on what the project was. It would have an immediate impact on the overall number in terms of constitutional debt limit, capacity, all of that stuff, but not as much on the annual debt service. That would just happen over time as it's split.
Right.
Yeah. And those numbers for the general fund are found on page 17. The first 2 amounts, we have a principal, then we have interest.
Yeah, we barely killed that marina. If Councilor Peeler was here, we might have been proactive and had a marina, which would have created economic revenue, unfortunately. But the 3.2 million, as you've heard, we've already paid back some of that, so it wouldn't definitely be 3.2 million. And the 800 and some $1,000 to repair the pier would have to come from somewhere. So that's a must. Otherwise, you're going to have a pier that you're going to have yellow tape, and you're not going to be able to walk out on that thing. So there's a lot of challenges, and talking about killing the marina is also a conversation about stifling economic development.
That's an opinion.
Sure is, by many people in the city of Geneva, and entrepreneurs in the city of Geneva, and boaters in the city of Geneva.
And taxpayers in the city of Geneva.
Right.
The next thing we make
Are we
money on.
collecting any interest on any of that bonding money at this point? We might be making some money off of this.
We are.
Great. It's good to
yeah.
hear. I'm not looking for a number.
Okay, good.
Just looking for positivity.
That
We're
was
doing
a
all
very
right.
quick answer.
Yeah, we are. Again, not even though it's nice, it's not ideal as far as debt capacity and things like that, because we are also paying interest. And so as long as those numbers stay the way that we like them, we're happy. But we would, as city staff, we'd much rather see projects getting done and getting the money out the door.
I could use my natural voice, but I won't. Question number 10 actually came up in various discussions I've had over the last week or
We're
two.
going to hit that right at the end, Councilor Petropoulos,
Oh,
with
okay,
all the
sorry.
fund balance conversation.
Very good. Thanks.
Yep. As I said, we're jumping around a little because we tried to tie together some of the questions for at least notes purposes, which I know I'm driving Adam nuts as I take notes as he's talking. I think before we go there, we did want to talk a little bit about the general fund and the totals. So the general fund is 22.45 million. The levy is 9.05 million. It's a 2% increase. There were questions why I chose the 2% increase. 2% was a conservative estimate in the absence really of that specific direction from the entirety of council. I went with that just to ensure we can maintain our current essential operations. We did consider other rates, but we felt it was important to stay aligned with council's priorities and then leave room for further discussion. I think you guys are having some of those discussions now. I did choose to use fund balance, as we talked about, and we're going to talk a little more about fund balance in just a minute. I only use fund balance for one-time purchases. They are not reoccurring things. So if it may be a vehicle, it may be something that we need one time, it may be a repair, something like that. They are not reoccurring expenses. I never put staff in fund balance or insurance or any of those things. Again, it just wouldn't be financially sustainable to use that fund balance. Adam, do you want to talk about fund balances?
Okay. So for fund balance, we'll just kind of talk general fund here first. The fund balance, just to reiterate and to go over again, is what is left over at the end of the year. A surplus is good, a deficit is not good. So currently, we are within our ranges that we like to be in. General fund between 12 and 15%, and that's just historically what we've had a preferred range. Council can certainly decide to change what range they're comfortable with, and then we will follow that. And water and sewer has been 30 to 35%. With the proposed budget, after proposed drawdowns from fund balance, we would have general fund balance of just under 20%, so still above range. Water, 33%, so right in range. And then sewer fund at 35, so a little above. It's fine to be a little below. It's fine to be a little above. Where you get into trouble is when you get way too low or way too high. If you're too low, basically what it means is you are not charging enough for your services, or you're spending too much. You're spending more than you're bringing in. If you are, if your fund balance is too high, and that back in the day when the city of Geneva was audited, another city was also audited for the opposite reason. We had too low of a fund balance in our water fund. They had too high of a fund balance, which the state comptroller deemed was not appropriate because it's basically you're overtaxing your residents. So we're in my opinion, good shape for fund balance for all three funds today, and we would, in my opinion, be in good shape for fund balance at 2026 with the proposed budget as well. As Amy mentioned, we don't use fund balance for anything that's recurring. So things like equipment, one-time costs, that's what we're pulling from fund balance for. And essentially what that's doing is keeping the tax rate flat or at 2%, because if we weren't purchasing those one-time costs from fund balance, they would have to come from somewhere else. The most logical place would be a tax rate increase. So, you know, while you never subsidize or you never use fund balance to avoid a tax rate increase, that's kind of how you do things like this with one-time costs. The state controller's office just came out with our the fiscal stress, which I mentioned at the last presentation I did. The city was listed as no designation, which is a good thing. That's where you want to be. In years past, we have been, I believe it's like moderately stressed, severely stressed. There's a lot of stress and overwhelm at the state controller's office. We are no designation at the time, which is good. Again, it's based off of a certain formula and certain scale. It doesn't, take into consideration if you think the tax rate is high, if you think the tax rate is low, certain things like that are not factored in. But the ability to make your payments, the ability to tax, and your capacity is factored in. So in good shape there. I'm trying to see what else in fund balance we had some questions on. Yep.
I would say one other thing that we did talk about last year when I presented this too is looking at those ranges and seeing what council finds as an acceptable level. They are set by council, and we've had those ranges for quite a while. The other thing to remember is when you're talking about them, percentages mean difference in the size of the total budget. And what I mean by that, your water and sewer being at 33% or 35%, the reason for that is that's not a significant amount of money when something breaks at one of your plants. I always joke, Joe is expensive when he comes to me with an emergency because the equipment used to operate those plants is expensive. And so keeping that fund balance really for rainy days. Similarly with the general fund, while we did take out of it this year and we took out of it a little bit in 2025, we were able to do that because we came in under budget. So that means that rolled into the fund balance. And so we use those funds. I try not to come in too far under budget. I like to be pretty close. Adam learned that last year, probably too close for his comfort. But at the same time, I think we need to be realistic about what that range is. And that's why we stayed close to that 20% with what we estimated taking out of the fund balance. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the non-funded items that there were questions on. You want to hand them out this time and walk around? I'll take one. And this is quite a large document. And what you'll see is it is what was handed out at the last council meeting. It gives the item, the expense, the item type. So this is now sorted as requested by types. So you'll see equipment, programming, facilities, staffing, technology, or vehicles. And then it goes by your current council goal areas. So you established 5 different goals. This is tied to each of those goals. And then there is an outline of why the department or the agency, the BID is in here, Business Improvement District, requested this item and what they felt that request would do for their organization. And on that, there was a question about how many vehicles and how many staff. So you can see there's 7 vehicles and staff. There were 1, 2, 3. That's actually 3. 12, 13 staff that were requested. So there's quite a few things here. One of the things that we did notice that didn't make its way here, and it was an oversight on my side, is the fire department also requested for water rescue equipment. The reason it didn't make it here is they had a range depending on what type of program that they were going to go with. But that's something. And then at the bottom continues to be those things that would need to be future funding in order to maintain. Those are things like concrete step structures, city hall roof replacement, city hall masonry work, replacement of the DRI items, lakefront trails, mill and pave, playground equipment, and replacement equipment. Those maintenance items were not included in the current budget. But this goes through each of those areas by goal area and by type of equipment. Next question. Do you want to answer this one, Taylor? Which technology or process investments were cut that could reduce or produce some savings?
Yeah, absolutely. So taking a look at some of these items that were not recommended, obviously, you know, I think the message came across in the city manager's message that accompanied the budget that these are not ideal world, like changing the game things. These are also items to help maintain the quality of life and services for our residents. And so taking a look at some of these items, we wanted to help think through where we could see some of those ROIs on these requests if they were included in the budget. So some of the ones we were able to identify that would have some type of return within 24 months. The performance metric software, right? This improves efficiency. It identifies areas for cost reduction. It enhances that data-driven decision-making we've talked about a couple of times here. I took a look at some different research, the ICMA, GFOA, and this typically yields a 5 to 15% efficiency gain in staff and operating costs. So just for an example, if we spent $50,000 on this performance metric software, we could see an estimated annual savings of about, you know, plus or minus $25,000, 24-month savings of about $50,000, you know, within that 24 months. Looking at some equipment that the fire department requested, this often extends the lifespan of that equipment, which reduces those costs. So looking at a flow meter, right, that tells us that we're using the proper flow through the hose, which will reduce the amount of maintenance that's required on that. So initial research shows that that'll save $3,000 to $5,000 annually in costs on that maintenance. The hose dryer, it could extend the hose lifespan by 2 to 3 years. The breathing apparatus cleaners, 25 to 30% longer service life there as well. Thermal imaging cameras, those can reduce fire loss by 10 to 20%. Grant writer and grant administrator, it's not often that staff have an immediate return on investment. Those are likely, you know, service improvements, efficiency improvements that you see over a period of time. But with grant writers and administrators, you do tend to see a $3 to $5 payback for every dollar you spend in their salary, you know, in those external funds that you're able to receive through their services. Replacement vehicles, investing in those vehicles often reduce some of those long-term costs. You know, you'll have those upfront costs, so it just takes a little bit longer than 24 months to see that return. And then also we had requested an electrician, and oftentimes when we have one electrician, that means we need to outsource some of the work that we do, which has a cost that comes with that. So those are just some examples from this list of ways that we would see a return on investment, you know, if we were to bring those back into the budget.
And we'll provide that whole list to you. Taylor did a great write-up that I'll provide that shows all of the items that she just spoke through of some of these areas that we could see that 24-month ROI.
So in other words, the list that you're planning on giving us, which was going to be my question, will entail the long-term savings for at least the first couple of years, yes?
Correct.
Okay.
And those are estimates. You can also see the source documents utilized to get to those estimates where they're available, things like GFOA, benchmarking studies, or NFPA or FEMA. So lots of acronyms that we can add to the glossary, Adam.
Question number 2? Yeah,
Mhm.
quick. So I know we may or may not even want to go here just now, but the budget you're proposing, that's all well and good. What would, say, a 5% increase, a 10% increase budget look like? Is that going to be something you're going to have to pull all-nighters?
I'm going to
Or-
stop you real quick before you give an answer to that.
That's
I
what
think,
thought.
Counselor, the important part, because I'm with you in many aspects of understanding how we give staff the tools to be effective. And I think one of the key things that was mentioned was one-time costs. There's a possibility to pull from fund balances that are fairly healthy in some aspects. But when it comes to repetitive costs, that will impact the number you're asking for. So, a 3 to 5% increase in the tax rate, what does that mean? That means a repetitive 3 to 5% revenue generation from the taxpayers that would facilitate grant writing or electrical position or something that would be a repetitive expense to the city of Geneva. Whereas a truck or a piece of equipment will be a one-time cost and will be one and done, and it wouldn't be a repetitive cost throughout the year. So it's a tough question, I think, to answer, and I'm going to, if you want to answer it, go ahead.
Yeah. So I think one of the pieces that became a challenge with last year is, as your city manager, I'm charged with creating a budget based off the direction that you give. And you've provided that direction, and I've provided a budget that supports what I can pick out through the tea leaves sometimes. At this point, it becomes more of another council philosophical discussion on what services or amenities do you want to make sure are incorporated into this budget. And I've given to you some of the services and amenities that I've changed or cut. Hard discussions with staff on which piece fits and which one doesn't. As you saw, and I think we've reiterated multiple times, these are not large wish list items. These are things that our departments feel will make them be more effective or efficient. And so that's why we'll have that information for you to make some of those hard decisions on, does it make sense to try to invest in a certain type of resource? Does it make sense to use fund balance for another? And always, and the mayor and I have talked about this before here, I'm always cautious with using too much of your fund balance. Yes, one-time uses, but you never know when that rainy day is going to happen, and that's where your fund balance comes in.
And maybe just to put things in perspective, a 1% increase on the tax levy would provide, what, $85,000 to $90,000 a year in revenue?
Yeah, about 90. Yeah.
So just to give you an idea, if you said 3%, that'd be 270,000. 5% will be somewhere around that 450,000.
yeah.
So if you wanted to fund an electrician or a grant writer or whatever it might be, those would be the numbers.
Basically, with staff, you're talking about a 1% for benefits and everything for any staff person that you would put on, roughly. Let's see. What did I miss, Adam? Or council members?
Somebody wondered about equipment amortization. I don't know who.
Wasn't me.
Really?
I have a lot of comments about it, but I did not ask a question.
We'll touch on that quick. So the question came up, if funds were used from fund balance to the equipment amortization, what's the process? So we did allocate funds from fund balance to purchase one-time equipment. Essentially, equipment reserve or equipment amortization and fund balance are treated the same when it comes to making a purchase for equipment. So let's say we're purchasing a plow truck, and it's $300,000, let's say. If we want to pull from the equipment reserve, it's the same as if we're pulling it right from fund balance. However, fund balance can be used for a million other things, million other uses. Equipment reserve can only be used for equipment purchases, right? So one thing, the mayor mentions this a lot about equipment amortization. This is something that we used to do much more frequently, which was allocate funds to that fund each year. So we would, let's say in the general fund, $50,000 would be allocated to equipment reserve, so that over the next couple of years, rather than have to finance or come up with $300,000 in 1 year for a plow truck, we're able to kind of start saving over the prior years. And then what would happen is, when we take the old plow truck or an old piece of equipment, declare it surplus and sell it, the proceeds from that sale would then go back into that equipment amortization fund. When budgets get tight and things get more difficult, those can be the easy places to cut from. And that's basically what happened over the last however many years. One thing that I always kind of recommend, although it's much easier said than done, is at the end of the year, if you have a surplus, take that surplus, allocate it to the equipment reserve. You weren't planning on it being there. It's a good place, it's your savings account for equipment long term. And if you have a deficit, then obviously nothing goes to that fund that year. But I do think it's a very valuable tool that governments have, and we could utilize that more appropriately if we kind of had that capacity. There's a lot of other expenses out there, as you can see from the list of things that we're not purchasing. So for Amy or I to say, all right, we're going to put $50,000 in equipment reserve and not fund something on this list, that's a difficult decision, and we didn't feel that appropriate for this year.
Adam, how much is in our equipment reserve?
Page 99.
Yeah.
And I will draw your attention to 99, since we're talking about that. 99, flip the page to 100 and 101. You have 337,957 in general, 450,577 in water, 258,736 in sewer. After expenditures, you'll see those numbers drop in 2026. When you go to and no funding going into those accounts. When you go to 2027, you'll see 50,000 going into each one of them, or you'll see expenses that are important to be taken. In 2028, you'll see 50,000 again going into those funds, but if you look at the general fund, it's down to $70,000, and you can't even buy a truck for that. So we're cannibalizing the equipment replacement fund to try to squeeze the penny.
And that's a good point, Mayor. And one of the things I wanted to mention too was that it is split amongst the three funds. So general, water, and sewer each have their own equipment reserve fund.
Counselor, go ahead.
Okay, this is coming out of left field, but one of the big expenses, of course, is our health care for our employees, and there's a 31% jump. I suppose why? What are the drivers? Can we do better?
Yes. So I will say health insurance has gone up everywhere. And right now, 3 years ago, I think we changed providers and saw some cost savings in changing providers. We've also changed what benefits are provided. That's done on a contractual basis. Health insurance is only one piece of all of that. We did see a large rate increase this year. I will say that our previous provider also is seeing and experiencing a large rate increase. It's partially the healthcare industry. So I do sit on the board, and as does Jennifer, for our healthcare consortium. It's a group of, I don't know how many municipalities, and they are charged with trying to find ways to reduce our rates. Some of that means benefit plans changes. So we don't provide some of the things. Some of it could mean when we are in negotiations talking about different benefits, and we've started to do that to try to find cost savings. Overall, I will say I know other municipalities who are rising 36% this time, and it makes our 18 to 19 look good on health insurance. We'll continue to make changes as we can. The other thing we know, we do not provide dental or eye, those are all, we have taken those away from our employees.
So I guess the question is, what's driving these, I mean, the healthcare industry? Obviously, it's been in the news, but
Yeah.
why? Who's getting rich off of this?
Look at the Fortune 500 listing, and you'll get your answer right there.
Yes, and it's not the Public Services Commission, but there is a commission in New York State that reviews all the rates in the state, and they continue to push down the rates, but the rates are growing by each of your insurance providers. So we have worked with our current provider. They are lower. They are working on ways to continue to reduce the rates. One of the ways that they reduce the rates is by having additional municipalities join. The other thing that is happening now, though, is all of these providers are experiencing what's called high loss claims. So people who aren't, getting the preventative care sometimes, and when they come in, a toothache is now much bigger than a toothache, but they never went in for the small pain. They went in for the large pain, and now the cost is a burden to all of the providers.
Amy, if you shop regularly or based on the contracts that are coming up?
So,
My question being,
yeah.
if you found a lower rate, how would you do that with, were you already in a contract with labor? Or
So
can you change it?
no. So some of our coverage and what percentage of coverage we pay for is contract negotiated with our unions, except for management. Also, what plan offering. So, for example, our police officers are all on a high deductible health insurance plan that's negotiated into their contract. Other units are going to that with new hires. Some of our units we have a lot of units that pay single coverage 100% of coverage, and then a lower percentage for family plans. We also provide under that incentive to not use our insurance. So there's ways to do it, but a lot of it is contractual, to your point. And then when we talk about providers, so we work with, it's now calling themselves, I think, the Municipal Health Insurance Consortium. It's all municipalities. You get into that for a 3 to 5 year time frame, and then if you were to switch, you have to be accepted by another provider. One of the things that we don't do that we used to do, and Mary, you probably remember this, when we were self-insured, which is a much higher cost because you only have your claims that you're using. By being in a municipal consortium, we have everyone's, and we're working together on that. And I will say that we did not support some of the rate increases with the consortium, but we are one vote among many votes, and also at the same time do understand why the rate increases have to occur, because they have to cover their costs as well.
Your health insurance is on page 31. I think it's interesting when you look at that page to look at two other expenses. And I got to say, we are a good employer. We have been a good employer for many years. And I will compliment staff in their negotiation efforts on an annual basis to negotiate with the unions to be able to understand what the city can or cannot afford. And my reference is the $3 million in retiree health benefits and expenses that we will pay in 2026. Now, a retiree is not on the job, so we're not getting a direct value benefit of that retiree working for us and creating value on the floor, but we have made agreements throughout the years. And we continue, and this is just not the city of Geneva, this is municipalities and school districts that are burdened by these agreements that they have made in the past, that are expenses that the taxpayers have to pay on an annual basis. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but I'm directing to staff the compliments to keep that negotiation effort going to reduce those long-term costs to municipalities and to school districts that the taxpayers have to burden annually, and really don't create value for the current year, but create value for those people that work those hard years throughout their work life.
Yeah, thank you. One question that I did jump over, any changed fees, pilots, or one-time revenues used to balance 2026? So I'll start with fees. Our fees and rates are page 109. They include all current rates and fees. The only fees that were adjusted this year are administrative fees for tax foreclosures, which we increased from 150 to 250. There are no one-time payments adjusted in there. We do an annual adjustment of what we believe the fees are. Sometimes we may know that there's a pilot potentially coming and we try to estimate it, but every pilot is different and outside of our control on what that final payment looks like a little bit. So those fees and fines are there. One of the things I do know is we wanted to do in next year is looking at some of our recreation fees and some of the others. We continually do annual comparisons with other municipalities to make sure we're competitive, and we're also providing those benefits to our users. I think that's all of the questions.
Counselor, go ahead.
I know that all of these things are defensible. I love the workers. I love what they're doing. But when I look at the last 2 years of spending, and I calculate that, and forgive me, I'm not Adam. I can be, but that if I look at 2030, we're like at almost $49 million all in. City council, at the rate we're spending now and the rate at which we're going, we're ending up with a budget that I look at and don't know if that it's sustainable, so that if looking that rather than waiting for a crisis where we have to have massive layoffs or reduction in services, that what I'm pushing for is a real look at revenue production and some preparation for the fact that we're not going to be able to afford everything we're doing now.
Yeah.
And that calculation, I think probably Adam will have more credibility with it than the one I did myself, but it's a scary number for a city of this size with a tax base and a housing situation the way we have it. So that's why we can do these year by year and look for every little saving, but we may be coming to more of a cliff with the numbers. And I think it will have more credibility coming from you, Adam, to have that longer 5-year look at where we're headed here with insurance rates going up 31%.
Right.
In our budget is a choke.
Right. And I think that's one of the pieces that I put in my budget message as well, is we need to really develop and hone those strategic council priorities, and what you're hearing from your constituents are things that are musts and mays, and having those real conversations, as well as what revenues are coming in or not coming in. Grants are wonderful things. That's one of our main revenue drivers. Grants come and go, and it depends on what kinds of projects we're coming for. Having some nonprofit background, sometimes you see that mission stretch from your nonprofits where you start to do one thing and you have to do another little thing to make it work. And I know, Councilor Levin, you're very familiar with that
Right.
struggle. And I think that's one of the things that for our government is also a struggle, because the government is the baseline service for the people. And so how do we still provide those services at a quality that we can live with, that also has the quality of life that brings people to this community to increase that tax base? So there's a lot of different drivers that I think we need to pull on. And I think some of the discussions that we've had as a staff already about being data informed, looking at what are those ROIs, how do we make sure that we're putting that front and center, putting metrics into your budget, which hadn't existed in the past, so people can understand what are you paying for, how many parks are we servicing, how many buildings, what is the age of our buildings? I think that's another important thing to understand. Age of our vehicles, those are all things that we are monitoring much more frequently. And then having the hard discussions of what is it that we want to make sure is the center of the mission of the city.
You must have been reading my mind. Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd be remiss if I didn't, this is a DPW discussion, but deferred maintenance and continued disinvestment are two things that I preach all the time. You almost certainly can understand the concerns, tax burdens, concerns with the rates and the increases, but we have so many things that have a lifespan, and they're beyond half-life, they're beyond extended life. When we had to close a playground this year, you know, it bothers us because we want to provide that service, but we need the lists that we provided are definitely not wish lists. They're more of like keeping things up. So I hate to not have it in this year, knowing full well the costs are going to increase 2 years, 3 years down the road.
Well, first the city manager read my mind, and then Joe did, so I'm going to hit the city manager's comments up first. And it really has to do with being progressive enough with economic development. So we have a couple of line items for grant writers, and we know grants are important to the city of Geneva, important to economic development, and keeping things moving in the right direction. They're, without approving grant writers, which I know is a repetitive cost, I'm being extremely cautious when I say this. Are we going to be using outside services, or are we going to stall our efforts for grant writing?
So we did leave funding in the planning and economic development funding line for some grant writing. It is not a large amount. I also will give credit to some staff that have helped support grant writing, as well as some community members that have written grants for us.
My thanks to them, very much so.
Absolutely. So we have piecemealed together. We have, and it's on my budget page, which I don't know the number of, but somewhere on the city manager's budget page, it shows the total amount of grant funding that we brought in year to date and last year. I'm pretty proud of the amount of funding we're bringing in, but also it goes back to, we do have a grants administrator. She is not our grant writer. She monitors that and sends us lengthy emails to make sure that we are doing all the things to keep that funding coming in and that we're using it all. When I talk about the marina and our relationships with the state, she ensures all of that is happening. A grant writer would build off of her and start to really develop some of these things. The other piece that I'm surprised Director Venuti didn't mention, but I know he has also been working on, we've been working a lot with FEMA after 2 disaster declarations. And for anyone that has ever worked with some federal agencies, FEMA is a challenging agency. I think, Joe, you meet weekly with our representatives?
I do every Thursday.
Every Thursday for multiple hours. But that's to bring in some of the relief from those damages that we incurred. So, yes, a grant writer is not a wish, I think, in a lot of ways. It's a need to continue to move forward and to find additional revenue.
Counselor?
So what you're basically saying in 30 seconds or less is that a grant writer, assuming it was a good grant writer, would save in the long run, so we don't have to get outside or don't have to have Joe write a grant where he could be sorting socks or putting up, doing something construction oriented. So that's, thank you.
That's a
Says it
yes,
all.
and because I do want to also say a grant writer doesn't work alone. They still are going to need your department heads and others. They will still need consultants from time to time because they don't know everything. I give all of our grant administrator has learned so much, I think, about DPW and those options. She's more in the human services realm. Same with your grant writer. We may have a great grant writer that comes in. The other challenge, though, I will put in there, and my caution with the grant writer, finding a municipal grant writer is extremely difficult because your grant writing consultants, back to Councilor Lavin's point, their charge per hour is much higher than a municipal wage.
So, I'm going to be fully transparent here as I move through what I'm going to talk about, but council as a whole, when we're in budget season, so, I mean, when we talk about staff, I think grant writer ranks high on my list. This green sheet of paper is very valuable to me. It's not anything I have thought of. I won't take any credit for this. It is the hard work of the city manager and the staff members saying this is really what we need for the city of Geneva. So we should think about that grant writer position. I know it's in 2 locations. If we can go halfway, I'd be happy. One question, electronic timekeeping, is that repetitive or is that one-time cost?
That would be repetitive costs. The initial startup costs, and we are moving forward with some of that. And Adam, you know more about that if you want to talk to that.
Yeah, so there would be, some costs wouldn't recur. Some would be just one time. like installation setup, things like that. And then there's, with any software, you know, there's ongoing maintenance costs annually. But I don't anticipate that being an extravagant amount.
So we are fairly archaic in our timekeeping, so I can't even imagine that. I mean, being in an industry where timekeeping should be automatic, it's disappointing that we're not
Yeah,
there.
I mean, I think it will do a lot of things that maybe a lot of people won't see initially. But it really will give us the opportunity to potentially change certain things in contract negotiations long term that we're just not able to do now. You know, certainly saving staff time is going to be a huge part of that. That you won't see a dollar savings, but we'll be able to focus in other areas where now it can really be problematic. We're lucky that we have experienced staff who can make this process go quickly, but we've seen people come in and try to handle that system and struggle for years. So definitely it's something that'll be a solid improvement, reallocate staff time, I think, for a small annual cost.
One of the reasons so that's actually from the last year's
Yeah,
list.
yep.
One of the reasons too that there's a slight challenge with this, which we can do it. Some of this is a negotiated benefit and how we keep time. And so that means working with our unions. And so some of this we're still working on, which means we may not need to have that expense right away because we're going to work on it. And that was one of the reasons why Adam chose not to put it in this year's budget, is because we're working on the pre-work of working with our union partners, who also, I believe, see the value in this and how it can improve efficiency for all of their staff.
Okay, so my last thing in full transparency is I've taken a look, because you know my pet peeve is equipment and equipment amortization, and how we can save millions of dollars by being efficient and rotating our stock in a timely manner and keeping our employees in safe vehicles and good-looking vehicles, which is a perception that we need to have in the city of Geneva. I'm looking at $78,500 for fire equipment that I think is critical, and I do appreciate what you handed out today, which just emphasizes what I think is extremely important. The code vehicle, $45,000, Public Works, $65,000 truck, rec van, $65,000. It totals $253,500. I will not make a motion tonight, but I will be moving forward, and my motion will be to take that from the general fund reserve balance, not just the $253,500, but I would also like to make sure that we add to the equipment reserve fund with $100,000 in general and $50 in each one of the sewer and water funds to keep those moving. Overall, the impact to the general reserve fund would take us to a 18.8%, which is still above our currently 12 to 15% recommended budget. I'm saying that out loud because I will not make that motion tonight, but I intend to make that motion. There are also 3 water trucks at $180,000. You threw out a number of 30% in water reserve tonight. I calculated 33.32. So I was hoping that we could also allocate the 180 out of that reserve and still stay within our recommended fund balance.
I have the 33.32% exactly as well.
Okay, great, thank you. So 180 can still keep us within those limits. So that's
correct.
full transparency. That's where my brain is headed.
Okay.
Just quick follow, the fire truck, we keep saying it's grant funded, but it's really a CBDG.
So it's CDBG funds that are still in New York State. They are not federal funds.
Right.
We have requested $1 million for that grant. It's a grant. I have no guarantees on that. We put it in the capital improvement plan with anticipation of getting that $1 million, and then there's the match of $200,000, which I think we chose general fund for.
The CBGD money could be used for many other things, though. If you chose to go after that, if you put the fire truck off for a year and use the CBDG, I know you're not going to be guaranteed you'll get the CBDG money the next year, but
Yes, you
some of
could.
these,
You could.
Right.
I would say we've already received pre-approval for the fire truck because they want to get the money out as soon as possible and are encouraging us to do a one large expense. That doesn't mean
because they're afraid of getting it raked back from
correct.
the feds.
I can only assume, but that was kind of the message that we received was go for a large expense that you can complete the project quickly and move forward. Now, I do say quickly, we know that the fire truck delivery will be 2 to 3 years, but the expense will be incurred and we can move that forward. That was the reason that I brought you the fire truck as that funding. Also knowing that those trucks are going up multiple thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars each year.
Is the grant writer going to be working directly for you?
For the city manager's office between Taylor and I. So I will say the grants
Right.
administrator works under Taylor, and so that seems to work. She also sits between the two of us in a city of, 100 and some individuals. It's not very far separations.
Right. That's good.
Jump in,
There was a
Counselor.
second grant
Well,
writer, though. I
Jump
almost
in.
Yeah, I
forgot.
suppose so.
There were 2 grant writers in there. One, Director Venuti would like a DPW specific grant writer, which would work under him if you were to go in that direction, because there are a lot of large DPW related grants. That's actually, I can't say it's a majority, but that's a large part of our grants, our DPW. And I think also in that was someone to assist with FEMA as well. So that grant writer is a little different than the general grant writer.
Right, so I'm going to jump in. I didn't want to interrupt. Tell me more about a planner. I mean, I'm assuming this is a planner with a big P.
Correct. So that was something incorporated in here are from those April sessions. This year's happened quickly. Because Director West and Director Sharman left, I incorporated their proposals of what positions they felt their departments needed. And so the planner was a position that David West felt that was needed, and he spoke to it more in that April meeting. It provides taking of all of the different documents, making them become a reality. We have had planners in the past. They were off under Planning and Economic Development or ONI, and then back to Planning and Economic Development. So this was a position that would be able to do some of the studies and some of the pre-work that we currently outsource. I would go back to that video, though, because I'm sure Director West did a much better job than I did.
Isn't that person sitting right behind you?
I would
Sorta,
say,
kind of, no.
yeah, but not. So I hope that our former
Taylor, how
director-
many hats do they have already?
Yeah. So a planner and having the planning credential is a very specific degree and designation. While we have many other degrees and designations among these 2 tables, none of us have the AICP or the planning background.
What was the title that last year budget season we did not fund? It was a coordinator that would have worked directly with you.
Community engagement coordinator.
Community engagement coordinator.
Mhm.
Thank you. And would that person have been a grant writer? Would that been one of the duties of that person?
So when I envisioned that person, it was more actually a planner
Communication.
/ communications person. So it was a combined of those 2.
Okay.
Someone that could do community engagement. A piece of the planner's job would be that community engagement, learning from the community what needs they have, developing things like the comprehensive plan, making sure they're being implemented. And then I had tied that in with communications, someone that full job is to make sure that we're communicating, that we're updating all of that information. The website is maintained, because currently the website is maintained, or the department pages that you see are maintained by different departments. There's not one person that does the oversight. And so it was a combination of those two positions.
Okay. I remember that the council didn't have a flavor for that, that's all.
Counselor, go ahead.
Quick question, where are we at on the coordinator, you know, the 3/4 of a pound apple?
So that we had shared, it is with Ontario County. We can't move it forward because it's a brand new title. And so they have to approve the title through civil service, and we're waiting on that approval. And I think Taylor sent a,
So that's not going to be in this year's budget, obviously, if we haven't picked anyone, is it?
yes, any of our vacant positions are included in the budget. So we have police officer vacancies, that's included in the budget. We have, I think that's, no, well, we have a new DPW vacancy that is included in the budget. Any positions that we're filling this year are included in next year's
So
budget.
nobody's been interviewed yet, we're waiting on the county, is that what I'm
Yes,
getting?
yep.
Okay, thanks.
Everybody good? Great discussion. Thank you very much, staff, and all your effort. I'd like a motion to adjourn. Counselor Petropoulos, seconded by Counselor Grimaldi. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We are now adjourned. Thank you very much.